This video is a dramatization of the attack by anti-Afghanistan forces on U.S. and Afghan National Security Forces at Cop Keating and O.P. Fritsch in Nuristan, Afghanistan on October 3, 2009. This attack resulted in U.S. and ANSF casualties and catastrophic damage of Cop Keating. This includes a collection of lessons learned from these events. All times during this video dramatization are in Afghan local. Established in July 2006 by the Kamdesh Provincial Reconstruction Team, Cop Keating was located approximately 25 kilometers from the Pakistan border in the Kamdesh district, 226 kilometers northeast of Kabul, and 137 kilometers northeast of Jalalabad. The squadron headquarters was located at Fob Bostik, 30 kilometers southeast of Cop Keating, and approximately 10 minutes by helicopter. Both the task force and brigade headquarters were located at Fob Finney and Jalalabad. Flight time from Cop Keating to Fob Finney was 40 minutes. The COP was situated along the lone improved dirt road and surrounded by extremely rugged mountainous high ground and was positioned to interdict historic trafficking routes to and from Pakistan. AF and smugglers used this remote area to transport weapons, fighters and equipment, as well as timber and gems. The main A&A compound was located on Cop Keating. The nearby village of Ermal was located 200 meters west of Cop Keating and was connected by an unimproved dirt road. O.P. Fritsch was situated due south of Cop Keating on the prominent high ground east of the Afghan village of Kamdesh. The ground unit assigned to Cop Keating and O.P. Fritsch had experienced over 45 engagements since assuming responsibility in May 2009. On the day of the attack, 53 soldiers and 20 A&A troops occupied Cop Keating. Forces at O.P. Fritsch numbered 19 soldiers and 10 Afghan National Army. O.P. Fritsch was located at a straight line distance of 2.2 kilometers from Cop Keating and sits on high ground. There was a 2,144-foot elevation difference between Cop Keating and O.P. Fritsch, and they were not within line of sight of each other. "250 to 300 anti-Afghanistan forces were reported to be in the vicinity of Cop Keating and O.P. Fritsch prior to executing the well-planned attack. AAF had small arms, medium and heavy machine guns, and mortars. Anti-Afghanistan forces conducted meetings in the months prior to the attacks with elders throughout the province. Simultaneously, they planned to conduct a large-scale, complex attack to overrun coalition force positions in Nuristan province. The planned attacks were timed to coincide with the scheduled closure of Cop Keating and O.P. Fritsch as an I.O. campaign favorable to the AAF. AAF forces occupied fighting positions inside the mosque on a nearby ridgeline at approximately 5:30 a.m. local on October 3, 2009. At the same time that the mosque was being occupied, support by fire Dishka positions were being in place in the vicinity of Cop Keating. The enemy is dynamic and will use a series of attacks to learn about how your unit will respond. Those attacks may be a deception of his actual intent. The unit was subjected to over 45 attacks in about 120 days, while the preceding unit was subject to the same number in 1 year. The AAF maintained a high level of op-tempo at surrounding coalition FOBs to mask his true intentions. The U.S. unit could not determine the AAF's true intention through the white noise of increased enemy activity. In the early morning hours of October 3, 2009, an estimated 250 to 300 AAF executed the thoroughly planned assault with small arms fire, RPGs, and B-10 recoilless rifles from the surrounding high ground and the mosque. During the open attack, all of the AAF support by fire positions opened up on Cop Keating. The fire from the SBF pinned down the mortar pit, and the soldiers were unable to return fire. Simultaneously, while the attack was started on Cop Keating, another AAF element opened fire on OP Frisch. This event put the U.S. platoon at OP Frisch in their own fight, and they were unable to provide any fire support to Cop Keating. Indirect fire from FOB Bostic began in support of Cop Keating. Approximately 30 minutes after first contact was reported, two F-15s arrived on station. They started engaging targets around Cop Keating. U.S. and ANA forces were pinned down by the AAF in multiple positions surrounding Cop Keating. The AAF executed a simultaneous attack from three different directions, supported by B-10 and RPG fire on all parts of the camp. Those assaults focused on the ECP, the ANA compound in the east and the western side of the camp. This forced the U.S. Operational Mentor and Liaison Team and the ANA to collapse into a smaller defensive perimeter within Cop Keating. At that time, two U.S. soldiers were pinned down by AAF fire in the mortar pit and could not join the defensive perimeter. At that time, coalition forces fell back to their final defensive perimeter. Approximately 1 hour, 20 minutes after the attack began, an armed Predator and an AH-64 aerial weapons team arrived on station. Due to the extreme number of AAF forces surrounding Cop Keating, the Apache contacted Cop Keating to determine the frontline trace of the defensive perimeter. At that time, they engaged the enemy leading to the bridge and provided air support to cover the Cop Keating mortar pit. A Predator began collection operations shortly after the battle started. Continuous UAS coverage remained on station for the entire battle. Buildings in the ANA and U.S. compounds started to burn and contributed to the smoke that obscured most of the area. OP Frisch defeated AAF forces and were able to provide 120mm mortar fire in support of Cop Keating. Upon identifying there was fire coming from the mosque, multiple requests were sent to higher headquarters to fire on the mosque. Permission was granted and the mosque was engaged by Hellfire missiles. On the second weapon pass of the mosque, an AH-64 from the aerial weapons team was hit by Dishka fire and forced to return to base. The remaining aircraft from the aerial weapons team was also struck, but remained on station. Approximately 3.5 hours after the initial attack, the fires from the aerial weapons team and close air support suppressed the AAF. This allowed the U.S. forces to attempt to retake lost positions within Cop Keating. During the fight, the AH-64s in support of ground forces came under intense enemy ground fire consisting of heavy machine guns and Dishka. During this period, a third AH-64 was struck by ground fire and was forced to return to base. As the aerial weapons team suppressed AAF elements, the defenders of the final defensive perimeter continued to push out to retake lost areas of Cop Keating. The The advance to retake positions was hampered due to the lack of available manpower. Most of the buildings on the COP were found to be on fire. However, the defenders were able to link up with the soldiers in the mortar pit. The first lift of the QRF from FOB Bostik arrived on station. Soon after their arrival at OP Frisch, a weather hold was declared and further elements of the QRF were forced to wait at FOB Bostik. After an hour later, the weather hold was lifted, allowing the rest of the QRF to land at OP Frisch. Within the first 3 hours after the attack, the ANA compound was completely engulfed in flames and the majority of the area was obscured by smoke. Fires from the ANA started to spread to the rest of COP Keating. Approximately 8 hours after the attack, COP Keating's TOC caught fire. The command element was displaced from the burning TOC and it was re-established in a secondary location. As the fire spread throughout the COP, the soldiers at the aid station cut down an adjacent tree to prevent the fire from spreading to the aid station. The Quick Reaction Force departed OP Frisch on foot to COP Keating. This is a long movement downhill, and to complicate matters, the path was not direct. Switchbacks and the presence of AAF elements slowed movement. Approximately 9 hours after the attack began, all buildings were on fire at COP Keating with the exception of one. Only the aid station remained safe, where the alternate TOC was co-located. During their descent to COP Keating and approximately 2 hours into their movement, the lead elements of the QRF called in close air support and engaged the AAF. The engagement was short and forced the Quick Reaction Force to move to a bounding overwatch. This further slowed movement to COP Keating. As dusk fell, the Quick Reaction Force continued movement to COP Keating. Approximately 13 hours after the Battle of COP Keating began, the Quick Reaction Force entered COP Keating and began clearing operations. The Quick Reaction Force also assisted in the setup of a landing zone to allow for medevac flights. The intensity of enemy ground fire directed at the responding aircraft prevented the aerial medevac from infiltrating prior to the U.S. unit securing the HLZ. Both close air support and close combat aviation were instrumental in the ground operations defending COP Keating. 44 close air support airframes were employed for a total on-station time of approximately 21 hours. 21 close combat aviation were employed in support of COP Keating. ISR provided 12 platforms. In the confined mountainous constraints imposed in the vicinity surrounding COP Keating, 37 GBUs were expended, 2 Hellfire missiles were fired, and 3 strafing runs were conducted. A few minutes after the arrival of the Quick Reaction Force, the first medevac aircraft touched down and several of the wounded were loaded on the aircraft. Approximately 16 hours after the attack started, the last medevac aircraft departed COP Keating.